And happy Digital Citizenship Week. I'm Kelly Mendoza, Vice President of Education Programs at Common Sense Education. And 10 years ago this week, Common Sense started the first ever Digital Citizenship Week. I'm looking forward to reflecting today on how far we've come and how much we've learned about teaching students, supporting schools and educators, and engaging families. And with me today, I have three knowledgeable experts on digital citizenship and supporting youth in a world of media and technology. And let me introduce our panelists. So Carrie and Emily, I'm going to introduce together their package deal. So we have Carrie James, who is a sociologist, and Emily Weinstein is a psychologist. And they are senior researchers at Project Zero, a research center at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. For over a decade, they have led research about youth and technology. Their projects focus on the ways social media shapes adolescents' everyday lives, including well-being, civic participation, ethics, and more. Carrie and Emily are passionate about developing resources to help schools and families support their children to thrive in a connected world. And they lead the research behind Common Sense's award-winning digital citizenship curriculum. They are authors of Behind Their Screens, What Teens Are Facing and What Adults Are Missing, which is based on their exclusive research with more than 3,500 US-based youth. And I also have my esteemed colleague, Merve Lapus, here. Merve is our Vice President of Education Outreach and Engagement. He has worked in EdTech for over 20 years, but has been partnering with schools to address digital citizenship with Common Sense for the last little bit over 12 years. So before we get started, I wanted to provide a little bit of context on Common Sense's partnership with Project Zero and our background of working with them. One of the reasons why I love my work is because I get to collaborate with scholars and academics and translate their research into innovative approaches into education, curriculum, and programs for schools. And so in 2009, Common Sense began a collaboration with Dr. Howard Gardner and Dr. Carrie James at Project Zero at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And Project Zero's mission is to understand and nurture human potentials such as learning, thinking, ethics, intelligence, and creativity in all people. And our collaboration supported the development of Common Sense's first digital citizenship curriculum. And over the years, we've adapted and evolved our curriculum based on the continued research of Carrie and Emily at Project Zero. So I just wanted to provide that background today because we've been had an awesome collaboration with them all these years. So I'm first going to start with a question for the group, and it's a looking back kind of question at the field. So it's been 10 years since Common Sense started the first Digital Citizenship Week, and it's been 13 years since Common Sense launched the first digital literacy and citizenship curriculum back in 2010. And so looking back, what did the landscape look like? What were the challenges that you saw were facing kids and educators and parents? What were they grappling with? And how were schools addressing these concerns? I'm going to first start with Carrie.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly and Merve. It's so wonderful to be here and to have this opportunity to do this sort of retrospective look back, think about how far we've come. And I feel like we've come a long way. And so it's just exciting to continue to do this work together. So a few things, like as I look back and I think about 10 years ago, we all felt like pioneers in this new landscape. And to a certain extent, we continue to have that feeling as new apps emerge on the horizon and we understand new things about teens. So the research part is really important to keep going. But back then, we saw our research as really uncovering new dynamics, new frontiers of social networking sites. Like Facebook was a newbie, and so were some of the other things that we take for granted today. Blogging, content creation opportunities, and we were really interested in how teens were using these things. And of course, on the intervention side, really wanting to understand how we can give educators and parents the information they need to understand this new world and support young people in it. And that hasn't changed. We're still motivated to do that kind of work. I'm sure that many of you watching this webinar were there in the early days, really puzzling over how to bring this new domain of life into your schools and classrooms. And perhaps you remember a huge emphasis in the work that we did was really around safety, making sure that kids were safe in this new landscape. And this aligns with a long history of how adults have responded to new media, whether it was when radio was first created or television. There's often been this sense of sometimes panic, but in many ways a well-placed concern about the safety and the thriving and success of young people, especially given the true unknowns that emerge as new media is developed. So in those early days, stranger danger was a leading area of concern, and that hasn't entirely faded. But even at the time, our partnership with Common Sense Education was really forward-looking and quite nuanced, and really picked up on the fact that even though there are risks and challenges, there are also positive opportunities for learning, growth, and development. And that tradition really continues to this day in developing curricula that touch on both the great positive opportunities as well as some of the risks and challenges.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I can really relate to the moral panics that we see with the rise of any new media. It's actually been a pattern in the field for many years. You mentioned radio, film, and actually just pop culture. There's moral panic over what adults feel like they can't understand or that's new. So that probably shaped some of the early beginnings. I want to pass it to Merve to answer this question on looking back.
Yeah, like if I look way back, I mean, my first connection to it was just ASL, age, sex, language. Like that was just me in chat rooms figuring this all out as a youth. And that was kind of my first experience. And then when I started getting into the work, the actual work, technology was still making its way into the classroom. We still probably in most classrooms had one device in the back of a classroom or two if you were lucky. Otherwise, it was mostly computer labs. So the level of attention and instruction on digital citizenship was relatively narrow back. And typically, if anyone was addressing digital citizenship, like Carrie mentioned, it was typically they were focused on things like cyberbullying or stranger danger. And it was typically just a technology teacher, technology lead, or our teacher librarians. Oh, the saints, they were doing so much all for the entire school in their one space, and these teacher librarians were doing all of the instruction, if at all. But now we see full school implementation and district implementation and actively aligning these things into the fabric of the way that they instruct, because technology has become such a big part of education. Also, looking back, I mean, I think a large part of the instruction, if it was, again, being provided at all, was really based on kind of a response to a concern or a need or an incident, right? It's about responsiveness. And digital citizenship has become far more kind of proactive, more culture building, skill building as part of kids' opportunities, development and growth, and technology especially. I think also, when we first started this work, a lot of our primary action was actually for parents. It was parent education through schools and helping schools to reach out to parents about this work. But now we see that schools and our work are often very much encouraging kind of this whole community approach, really ensuring that it's not just that we're supporting kids to address these issues, but we're supporting educators, professionals within the education space, community leads, families, caregivers, really making sure that it's not just something that's taught, from one individual or in one place, but that it is part of a discussion everywhere, because technology is literally a part of everyone's lives these days. So we've really seen kind of that big shift in something that was a term that was just starting to kind of grow and socialize a little bit, but is now something that has become actively used and recognized. And 10th year in a row, decade of DigCit. So really cool to see and look back.
Yeah, definitely, Merve. I am thinking, the rise of technology in schools has correlated, or, it's aligned with the rise of digital citizenship. I mean, if we think about tech in schools the past 10 years and how that has changed, that is also part of this big shift. So I really like that point that you brought up. Emily, looking back, what are your thoughts and reflections?
Yeah, it's so interesting, as Merve and Carrie were saying, so much attention in those early days to safety and stranger danger, and actually much less public attention to topics like youth and social media and mental health, which loom really large today. Researchers were really starting to lean into those topics around mental health and social media in the 2010s. And obviously, these questions feel just absolutely timely and critical as we think about today the public discourse around digital citizenship, and also the interventions that we need and want for our schools and classrooms. We're also capturing now in our research new kinds of digital dilemmas that are really relevant to teens today, and they're motivating shifts in how we think about digital citizenship, related in many ways to that mental health topic, but also to other kinds of burdens and opportunities. So I'll just give you one example here in the burden category, and this pertains to friendship dilemmas, which I know we've really leaned into collectively as we've been thinking about the curriculum too. So we're hearing from teens in our research more and more about how hard it is for teens to set boundaries and how burdened they can feel by the expectations of friends in a digital age where we have the opportunity to really be in touch with our friends 24/7. In some cases, this comes up as they're struggling to figure out what to do if a friend is texting for support, but it's late at night. And suddenly the impulse to disconnect from my own sleep and self-care gets pitted directly against this strong adolescent desire to be a good friend and to be available to my friends. So these are really competing priorities, and they're real tensions that we know kids are feeling. We hear from kids things like, I worry if I'm not connected, the friendship will fall apart. And even things like, I don't want my friends to do something bad to themselves because I wasn't available to be supportive or to help them. So adults might have this impulse to roll our eyes over the feeling that you need to be always available. But the truth is that these are really understandable dilemmas, and they're rooted in developmental impulses and competing values that are made harder by many of the affordances of today's technologies. All, of course, amplified by the realities of trends in adolescent mental health and the ongoing mental health crisis. So even if teens are not personally struggling, they are more likely than ever to have friends who are, and those friends may be voicing distress on social media or reaching out digitally for support. These can be really big burdens on young shoulders. So friendship dilemmas, that's just one example of new kinds of issues and trends that we're seeing that really emphasize why, as we continue to think forward for digital citizenship, we have to continue zeroing in on the details of kids' experiences and really focus on what they're struggling with and why, and what kinds of new supports they really need.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Yes, I think, there's the saying, like, this was a few years ago, oh, kids are meeting their friends, but it's just online now. But I don't think we fully understood what that meant in terms of developing relationships and identity. And it's really complex. It's a really complex world, and it is part of it, deeply entrenched and part of how they develop friendships and identities and their lives. So that is definitely a theme I see that is leaning into more over the next few years. So next, I want to focus on Carrie and Emily's new book, which is called Behind Their Screens. And this book, I encourage you to check it out. It dives deep into how teens build identity and relationships online, and much, much more around what parents can do to support teens too. So how has this research influenced the teaching of digital citizenship over the years, and how has it identified gaps? So Emily, I'll actually toss it back to you to talk about your latest book and research.
Well, I think above all, research has continued to help us get and maintain a teen level view of what it's like growing up with today's technologies, what's great, what's hard. And I think for us, it's really grounded the ways that we've worked together with Common Sense to make sure that the lessons and approaches are truly tied to the most timely issues for teens, even as those issues change. We often say we feel like we're chasing a moving target, but we know that that chase is just so essential to doing a good job at continuing to support digital citizenship. In 2017, just for example, we did a sweeping survey that really helped us identify pain points and relevant topics. We surveyed youth, we surveyed educators, and then we spent some time really creating a new set of digital dilemmas and thinking routines that were directly designed to help educators, so that even if you, as the teacher, have absolutely no idea what a snap map is or how Discord works, you can have the conversations that your students really need. So I think that's a big one. Research for us with teachers, direct research with teachers, also crystallized for us the overall aims of what we want to accomplish for teachers and students as we think about digital citizenship. There's this one educator quote that I know really stood out to us. A teacher who said, what I'm really thinking about is trying to prepare my students for decision making at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night. And this idea became such a touchstone for us because it really concretizes that the approach we need to take should focus not only on the skills for digital citizenship, which are essential, but also on the dispositions and mindsets that kids need so that they can put their digicit skills to use in their real lives at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night when we are not sitting next to them, but they're making really important, impactful decisions. So we've spent a lot of curricular energy around skill building and now also on making sure that educators are poised to support kids in the development of habits of mind and dispositions so that kids have sensitivity to moments in real life when their skills are needed and the real inclination to follow through and put those skills to use.
Right. Yeah, I think the idea is we want to develop the skills and dispositions that they can apply, whether it's to learning or for life. And life happens outside of school, and we want to position them with those habits of mind to make the right decisions for themselves at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night.
Absolutely.
Carrie, wanted to add your thoughts on your latest book and the latest research with teens and how this influences our approaches.
Yeah, I'll just build on what Emily was saying, that the research that drills down into teens' experiences that are often hidden from adults' line of sight really brings to life just how complicated it is to grow up in a really connected, networked world. So teens routinely grapple with situations in digital life. We refer to them as digital dilemmas in our research and across the curriculum, where values that they care about really come in tension with one another. And Emily mentioned this before when she was talking about friendship burdens. Does being a good friend mean being available whenever your friend needs you? And so that's an example of where the impulse to care for one another and be there for a friend can cut against the need to disconnect for self-care and sleep. Another one, should you record or screenshot what peers do or say online, even in private chat, when what they're saying is deeply offensive or hurtful? In other words, when is it appropriate to break someone's privacy in order to make them accountable for something that could be very hateful or harmful to a wider community? So these are complicated scenarios that don't really lend themselves to a straightforward rule of thumb or a list of digital don'ts. They show how some of these top level rules that we can create that are quite sweeping and screen time limits don't always cut it and can really fall short of providing young people with the support that they need. So we're really proud of the work that we've done in Common Sense to lean into the complexity. We've developed a library of digital dilemma scenarios that get at these same issues that we've just been naming. We've developed thinking routines that scaffold deep thinking and that really help build those dispositions that Emily was mentioning that allow teens to wrestle with the hard stuff when it comes up, 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, midnight on Saturday night. So that's really been incredibly powerful. We're right now writing a book for educators called Teaching for Digital Life around that describes the theory and the research that underpins those pedagogies, the power of thinking routines and dispositions that we want to build in our students.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah, I think the dilemmas are really powerful. And like you said, Carrie and Emily, there's no right or wrong answers to these dilemmas that we face, and they're contextual. They're highly contextual. So it is a great way to have conversations about what would you do in this situation, and really think through. There's a variety of options, and help foster a lot of those dispositions that we're trying to teach and support students with. So my next question is for Merve. And so Common Sense, we provide a robust and comprehensive digital citizenship solution for schools with a K-12 curriculum. We have interactive games for students, professional development and implementation support, and family engagement materials, and our recognition program. It's comprehensive, like I said. And in a survey of our audience at the end of the last school year, 95% of educators say that as a result of using our digital citizenship resources, students have learned digital citizenship skills. And so I'm just curious, in your role, having been at Common Sense for over a decade, as you mentioned, what shifts have you seen in how teachers and schools have adopted digital citizenship? What are the big shifts?
Yeah, man. Well, after you list the whole cadre of things we do, I'm like, man, we do a lot. But it's all been great. And I think that's part of the big shift, is just recognizing that educators are different, right? And they have different needs for the different needs of their classrooms. And like I mentioned earlier, when we first started this, the work was primarily a single teacher, maybe a small group of educators in the school or the district, teacher librarians I mentioned earlier, but also tech leads and TOSAs, teachers on special assignment. They were usually the ones and the only ones going room to room teaching these things. And you can imagine that way. It started to feel very much like its own subject, like it was very much just an add-on to a classroom. So any other teacher would probably feel like, oh, this is one more thing, or it's not within their capacity for their classroom or for what they even have availability to teach at this time. But fast forward now, years later, and working with schools and districts and just recognizing the different ways that this is all core to teaching core curriculum now, because you can't get to the core content if you're dealing with the drama that happened at 10 o'clock at night because whoever didn't really kind of make the right decision on that 10 p.m. Saturday night situation, right? But now we're starting to see that districts are really embracing kind of building this culture of digital citizenship in their schools, really important ways to align to things like curriculum, like their graduate profile, to their social emotional learning initiatives, their mental health initiatives, their health and physical education, and even other core classroom curriculum. The educators are provided this through direct instruction. They're aligning these discussions into topics together as part of some of their training, some part of their PD. And the reality is, you might have groups still teaching or individuals teaching the direct instruction, but everyone else is reinforcing it in some shape or form, whether it's reinforcing the skills in applying the way that they're using then collaborative tools in the classroom and resetting expectations, or if they're doing research, resetting expectations around how to lateral thinking, being able to look and find information that either really confirms or is an opposite perspective. And that's just a part of the fabric of how you do research, right? So part of the news and media literacy side of things, let alone how you then present yourself and your position and what that means, and then how does that affect you? These are all parts of what we do in the classroom already anyway. So reinforcing those skills and putting them to play so it's not a standalone, but really a part of the way has been a big shift. We've also seen that with quick activities and the touch point type resources we provided, it's made it a lot more accessible for educators who only have a little bit of time, but want to build it in. And that's just brought in a big need around professional development, because as you can imagine, it's not something that every educator comes in, they might know how to use Facebook themselves, or maybe even TikTok or Snapchat in a way that they've forayed into it. But then how does that affect then their own classrooms and the way that their own kids use it? So professional development has also been a huge part of what's been asked of us and what they've been providing for educators to make sure that they're kind of always on step with something new, because there is always something innovative or a new opportunity to bring technology into the classroom. But how are we doing so in a way where it's pedagogically meeting what you're trying to really accomplish, and not just because it's the newest thing? Because what are then the impacts and the implications of that all?
Yeah, definitely. It's really incredible to think back in the late 2000s, digital citizenship wasn't even really a known term. And here we are 2022, and we have districts implementing district-wide approaches to this topic. It's really incredible, and testament to the work of you and your team, Merve, of working directly supporting schools to help them figure out how is this achieving their goals too. And yeah, did you want to add more to that?
I mean, it's been fun. I mean, the reality, like, educators love being able to really understand where their kids are coming from, learn from them. Oh, trust me, that's another big thing. Kids are leading these discussions with their own educators because they're in it more than they are, or they have a strong recommendation around, you know what, this is what we're trying to do here. If we use this tool, we could actually better create, we can better format, we can get you what you're asking for. So educators are starting to really kind of look at this symbiotic way that technology plays a role, and kids and students have been really interested in being able to be a part of the classroom, not just the discussion, and developing the way that they learn. And that's all part of what technology can do when you can start to feel confident around building a foundation around the use cases of it all.
Exactly. I 100% agree with you, because I've seen a shift in schools and districts seeing digital citizenship as the foundation for digital learning. So, and it's not a separate thing that happens outside of school or at home. The lines are blurred, but it actually facilitates effective digital learning as well. Thank you so much. So next, we're going to do a question where you're thinking about sort of things that you've learned, like a lesson learned. So what are one or two things that you've learned about digital citizenship and the digital world over the last 10 years? Maybe these are things that have changed the way you think, or where you think we should put our focus, or change the way how you work. So I will start with Merve on that question. What have you learned over the past 10 years?
Yeah. So what I've learned is that, every community, and so I think there are some broad strokes that we're all thinking about when we think about digital citizenship. We're thinking about, what are the ways I'm spending my time? Like, screen time isn't, all measured the same. It's just how you're using it. What's the type of screen time, and what are you learning from it versus, we tend to just, look at that discussion and be like, oh, too much screen time, you spend too much time on it. But our worlds are defined around it. And the reality is, every community uses technology in different ways. So as we especially also think about the impacts around digital citizenship, around media and technology, what are the influences? What are the dispositions? What are the ways that their society, their community, their experience actually inform the appropriate way to think about their actions, their impact, the way that they want to communicate who they are, where they are, and even have that access to be able to do so, right? And so that's been a big thing for me, is really, we understand that there are some, especially because we're rooted in this work, especially with Carrie and Emily, we can really see a good through line around what are most kids going through at this time. And then when you start working really closely with schools and districts and seeing how are these things kind of like diverging or affirming based on the experience of those kids and those communities, and what are the ways to tweak that? What are the conversations that need to shift? What are the experiences that we need to either heighten or flatten out to better meet the needs of kids in that instruction? That's all been really helpful. And that's one of the things that me and my team and I are really interested in, is how do we make sure that not only are we creating content and resources that meet educators where they're at, but how are we providing resources that help them to meet where their kids are at and where their perspectives are coming from? And does it truly align to the stressors that they're going through, or the challenges that they're navigating? And that, this opportunity to be connected has given them more positive than challenge, versus feeling like, the framing oftentimes that, technology has so many challenges. How do we find the good out of it, right? And so it's really understanding where our kids are at, and then where does technology play a role in that, versus kind of leading, and this is the thing I learned from Carrie and Emily, leading in with the technology and then asking them questions all around about the tech, but just centering them, their experiences, their perspectives, and how does technology either affirm, support, or potentially become a challenge based on those experiences and how they see it and use it.
Great, thanks, Merve. Yeah, I think we're having some themes here, but I'm passing it to Emily around what have you learned in the last 10 years? How has that shifted your thinking?
Well, Kelly, one thing that's really concrete, but your question just immediately had me thinking about almost exactly 10 years ago, Carrie and I had a chance to work on a study of civic expression on social media and how teens and young people were really thinking about political and civic participation online. And we got to do this work with some of our colleagues. And the punchline that we heard again and again from teens was that it was really optional. There, some people were using social media to speak up about issues they cared about. Others were deciding not to for a whole host of reasons. Some people did for some issues and not for others. But there was really variation across the landscape. And we heard that, they were weighing different considerations, and then really that it was something that felt optional. In our research over the last few years, we heard how much this has shifted and how much it does not feel optional anymore for so many young people. There's a sense that taking a stand about issues is both essential and also importantly, really vexed. There's, peers are monitoring who speaks up and who doesn't, even breaking friendships over what's said and not said about particular topics. And we heard from kids about how their communities really shape the stakes of civic speech. Teens told us about how growing up, for example, if you're in an ideologically homogenous community, it can mean like that posting about your views on a particular issue is, as one teen put it, it's like feeding a fed horse. But it can still be essential or really important because there's this expectation that you have to signal your stance on an issue. And then we hear from teens who are in much more ideologically diverse communities about how posts can lead to major consequences for their offline relationships. We hear about things like someone posts something and suddenly their sports teammates are not speaking to them, or people are messaging them to say, I can't be friends with you anymore. So adults, sometimes have this impulse to either just say, stand up for what you believe in, or to just view social media as completely, performative or not really a meaty substantive issue. But we hear so closely when we actually listen to teens, we hear about how and why teens are grappling with concerns about performative activism on the one hand and cancel culture on the other hand, and real implications for their offline friendships. So it's really a complicated landscape. And that's before you've even layered in topics that are covered in the curriculum, like misinformation and extreme content. So this is just one area where I feel like we have seen major changes over the last 10 years. And a key reason why Carrie and I think are both so excited about the new Common Sense Civics and Digital Life lessons that your team has created to help educators really wade into these digital civic dilemmas.
Yeah, that's a huge shift, Emily. And I think, adults kind of have a tendency sometimes to say like, well, you don't have to participate. Well, don't participate. If something's bothering you, you actually can't do that, is what I'm hearing is, teens, young people, if they don't participate, I think if you're not online, you don't exist. So, yeah, it is a huge shift. And then if you do participate, there could be potential consequences. So, and it's hard to navigate all of that. Carrie, what are your thoughts and big learnings?
Yeah, I mean, what I have to say really pulls threads from what Merve and Emily both shared. We really would not be able to support our young people well if we didn't tune into the details of what's happening behind their screens. And Emily just spoke about like these really complicated civic dilemmas that are popping up. And so that ongoing research is really important. But one of our biggest lessons learned in recent years is not only that we need to conduct research where we listen to youth, but we actually need to partner with them in order to make sense of the data we collect and what's happening behind their screens. And Merve spoke to this issue earlier when he talked about bringing kids' expertise to the table in the classroom, creating a different kind of relationship where the teacher is not the owner of all knowledge and wisdom. Kids have expertise about their own lives. And we've really found in our latest round of research that it was essential to involve teens on our research team. We also recruited a youth advisory council of teens from across the US to help us co-interpret the data we were collecting from a larger group of teens across the US. And this was transformative. They really helped us uncover layers of complexity that we never would have known were there more kind of behind some of the big quotes that they shared with us. They talked about these subtle dynamics around online meanness that go beyond what adults think of as cyberbullying. It's a lot more subtle what's happening. Pressures related to sexting that adults often don't understand why teens don't just say no when a request for a nude comes in. So this was really powerful. They showed us that there's so much more than meets the adult eye when it comes to why they're tethered to their phones and the real complications and struggles they have around that. And we really won't go back to doing research the old way. This was a true pivot in the way we approach research and in the way we design interventions. And I know this is something that Common Sense is also leaning into, having youth advisors really sit alongside resource development work. It's happening in schools too. We hear of educators with whom we partner who are partnering with their students to co-develop community guidelines, to revisit device policies within a school so that they're really listening to youth and they're constructing codes of conduct and guidelines that really meet them where they are.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we think about school communities. Who is the majority of a school community? It's the students. And so I think, there's also a little bit of a pivot in roles, for teachers to not be the all-knowing expert, but to really listen to the challenges that students are facing and help them shape the narrative and shape how they want to be supported around all of these issues. These are great learnings, and it actually feeds into my final question for the group, which is looking at the future. So here we are in 2022, and we're in the current media environment. So with things like Meta and AI and things on the rise. And maybe it's not just tech, but there's really complex social and political issues. So with that said, what is one thing that each of you think we should be focused on over, say, the next 5 years? Maybe it's regarding challenges facing kids or parents or schools, or maybe it's opportunities, or just a big question that you have. So I'm going to start with Emily on looking to the future.
Okay, well, I think in many ways it feels like adults have been stuck in this roll around tech of being like the referees, where we blow the whistle when kids are having too much screen time or when they misstep and something goes wrong. But I think one of the things that we've really seen so clearly as we've leaned into trying to understand these dilemmas and how they're playing out for kids is that kids really need us to be more like coaches, less like referees, more like coaches. So not just calling them out when they make mistakes, but shifting so that we're really advising and strategizing alongside them. And so that they have this sense that we're really cheering them on to thrive in this context, but also kind of standing alongside them, helping them through the hard plays and dilemmas, some of the different challenges we surface today, like around these civic and political issues, around friendship boundaries, around sexting decisions. This is obviously really a learning process for us all, but we've heard from kids this need to know that adults are on their side and cheering for them for their success and wanting them to get the most out of the digital world. And I actually think this metaphor is really helpful and actually aligned with the research, because a key piece of this is recognizing that just as a coach, just as good coaching would mean not only someone, our students or our players knowing that we're on their sides, but also recognizing as coaches that it's okay to adjust our strategies based on kids' different needs. And I think in this case, recognizing, and we're doing this more and more, that kids are going to need different kinds of supports as they navigate digital citizenship, as they figure out how to live life with all these technologies. And it's not only okay, it's essential that we are ready and really empowered to recognize those differences, to lean into them. So this is really supported by the research on how different kids are actually really differently impacted by tech. And it's a hope I have, I think, for the coming years, is that we'll all lean into this coaching idea. We'll lean into understanding what differences we hear from kids in terms of what they need, and then how we can support them.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I like that coaching metaphor, and there's a lot of connotations that go along with it. If we think about You're leaning into different strategies, like you said, and not necessarily like gaining a bunch of knowledge and then being tested on it. It's a different kind of support system and mindset. So thank you. Next, I want to hear from Carrie, thinking forward looking at the future.
Yeah, I mean, our close work with teens has really prompted a recent pivot in how we approach digital well-being and citizenship. So this is along the lines of what Emily was just saying, that as we go as adults, we need to be open to adjusting our strategies as we learn more. And Merve kind of previewed this earlier, but I'm going to underline what this point is. Adults often have the impulse to talk about digital well-being and digital citizenship by starting with a focus on the tech. Like, is, Instagram, in what ways is Instagram causing depression, or how much screen time is okay versus damaging? But as we worked alongside teens in the ways that I described earlier, we saw the power of a really deceptively simple but meaningful pivot. What if instead we started by asking young people, what's hard for you right now? What stresses and pressures are you feeling? Putting tech to the side as we start a conversation, and then asking, how is technology making your stresses and your pressures better or worse? And in some cases, it really is better, and in some cases, it's worse. And so that simple shift to focus on the whole person and their well-being, and then locate the role of technology, is really, really powerful and opens up a different kind of conversation with young people.
That is a huge pivot, because I think the sort of instinct is to say what is TikTok doing, or what is Instagram doing, rather than focus on the individual, as you said, which is our youth. We're starting with them at the center. So I love that pivot, and encourage the audience to think about what would that look like in your settings that you work in and support youth. Lastly, Merve, looking to the future, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the futures laid out by Carrie and Emily. I mean, I love the focus and work and putting students at the center, putting kids at our youth at the center. And we also know that they're the most actively engaged and civically engaged rising adults out of all the generations right now. And so they've got things to say. They've got things to say with and in support of each other, and providing the space for them to do that is going to be incredibly important. But we also know that technology will continue to play a massive role in the way that we teach, learn, live, and thrive. So it is imperative that we all educators and everyone working with kids, do what we can to really bring digital citizenship into your discussions, into the skills and the dispositions that you kind of build as technology plays a massive role in kids' lives. And you may not be the teacher, quote unquote, that teaches digital citizenship in your schools, but you all should be really bringing digital citizenship into your classrooms, into your discussions in some shape or form. I encourage you all to use one of our activities or video discussions or something. This Digital Citizenship Week, this is a great time to do something and see how the discussion goes, how the conversation goes, and recognize that the next 5 years, moving forward, are going to be heavily dictated by some of the most vocal advocates for this work. And that is going to be the students. That is going to be the youth. They're the ones innovating and driving the tech, and they're being far more vocal about what they expect out of it. So I will sit back and watch and see what comes of it. And then I will step in to help guide and coach and share whatever I can, because the future can be bright, providing some good structure and some good insights, but it's all got to be done really by thoughtfully, being a part of the journey with them. So it's an exciting time.
Great. Thank you so much, Merve. I think that's actually an awesome note to end on, because we are encouraging you viewers to visit our Digital Citizenship Week page at commonsense.org/education, where you can see ways to get involved. And whether you're sort of newer to the field, or you've been doing this a long time, I hope that today's discussion leaves you with some food for thought especially around what are you doing now, or what could you be doing differently, and what could you do this week even. So I want to thank Carrie and Emily and Merve for taking the time to be with me today. And this was really a fruitful discussion for me, and hopefully for you viewers, and to take a look back and looking forward and thinking about how we can best support students, schools, and parents to navigate our complex world of media and technology. So thanks again, everybody, for coming, and happy Digital Citizenship Week.